When Matthew and Erin Carlson left Seattle for Los Angeles, they were chasing a dream they hadn't dared speak aloud for years. To escape the damp gray skies and open a vintage design studio in the heart of California. Both in their mid-30s, with no children and remote work flexibility, they sold their condo and started house hunting in earnest. It was Erin who found the listing quiet, off-market, and oddly underpriced for its location in the Hollywood Hills. It was Peter Fonda's old house. The listing made no mention of him, of course. It simply described a 1940s mid-century home with views stretching to Laurel Canyon, floor-to-ceiling windows, and original hardwood. But Erin recognized it. She was a cinephile, and Peter Fonda's name was woven deep into the tapestry of American film history. She knew he died in 2019 lung cancer. She remembered the news articles, the tributes. But this house, she'd seen it once in a documentary, or maybe a feature in Architectural Digest back in the late 90s. The couple got the house after a single showing. The previous owner, a lawyer who had inherited the property, seemed anxious to unload it, even leaving a few old pieces of furniture in the garage. They signed papers by the end of the week. The first night, Erin woke up to the sound of someone walking upstairs. That was odd because the bedroom was upstairs, and the living room was below. She lay there listening. One step, a creak, silence. Then another step. When she nudged Matthew awake, he dismissed it as the house settling. But it didn't stop. In the weeks that followed, subtle oddities began to build like condensation on glass, quiet and barely noticeable at first, then impossible to ignore. Erin's record player would switch itself on while she was in the shower, always playing a scratchy version of The End by the Doors, even though she was sure she never bought that vinyl. Matthew found one of his design mock-ups altered on his computer, just a detail, a skull ring suddenly appearing on a figure's hand. He assumed it was a glitch or some weird filter. Then came the smell. Sweet, acrid, chemical, and lingering like scorched plastic. It would drift through the downstairs hallway in the early morning hours, always around 4:30 a.m., and vanish before sunrise. They had the wiring checked, the gas lines inspected. Nothing. One night, after Erin came home from a late grocery run, she found Matthew standing barefoot in the middle of the patio, staring into the canyon behind the house. When she called to him, he turned slowly. His expression was blank, as if he were still waking up from something. "I thought I heard someone in the yard," he said. But their backyard was enclosed, bordered by the canyon's steep drop and hedges thick enough to stop a coyote. The next morning, he didn't remember going outside at all. A neighbor named Lila, 60-something, and blunt, finally brought it up. Erin had walked over to ask about the neighborhood association fees. As she turned to leave, Lila called out, "So you know about the house, right?" Erin turned. "What do you mean?" Lila shrugged. "The actor, Fonda, lived there for years. Died just up the road at St. John's. They say he never really left." When Erin laughed it off, Lila didn't. "He used to throw these weird after-parties. I'm talking late nights, fog machines, strange music, people walking around with blindfolds in the yard. I think he got into that new age crap near the end, talking about consciousness and energy transfer, even astral projection. Just saying, maybe all that stuff left a mark." That night, Erin searched the house from top to bottom. In the back of a closet in the basement-level laundry room, she found a shoebox filled with undeveloped film rolls. On each canister, handwritten labels: August 2004 Moon Ritual, Night Circle 2, Owl House, Peter and Guests. She didn't dare develop them. In late November, Erin began sleepwalking. Matthew would wake to find her standing in the hallway, hands gently touching the walls, whispering something under her breath. Her voice was low and almost reverent. The words didn't make sense. Iron Gate, Silent Lake, the god below the camera. They installed security cameras mostly for peace of mind. But what they caught on the footage only made things worse. On 3 separate nights, between 2 and 3 a.m., a figure passed through the hallway. Male, medium height, long shaggy hair, wearing what looked like a leather vest. The figure never looked at the camera, never touched anything. He would appear near the staircase, walk to the front window, pause for a moment, and disappear out of frame. The hallway lights never turned on. The motion sensors didn't trigger. Matthew sent the footage to a friend in film restoration who enhanced it. The friend sent a single text back. That looks exactly like Peter Fonda in Easy Rider. You guys messing with me? They weren't. By January, they had stopped inviting friends over. The few who did visit always left early, often citing headaches or strange feelings. One guest, an actor from Erin's film club, had a panic attack in the guest bathroom. I felt like someone was behind me, she said, breathless. Like they were trying to push me down into the tub. Erin didn't want to leave. She had become strangely attached to the place, almost protective. It's not malicious, she insisted. It's just watching, like he doesn't want to be forgotten. Matthew felt differently. He started looking for apartments behind Erin's back. When he finally told her, she didn't speak to him for 2 days. They moved out in April. They never sold the house. They still own it, locked and shuttered. Visited once a month to check for mail and water the plants. Erin sometimes goes alone, staying for an hour or two, walking room to room in complete silence. She says she feels safer there than anywhere else. When asked why, she always answers the same way. Because he knows me now, and I think he likes me. Don't forget to subscribe and like if you liked this story. The house sat quiet through the summer, hidden behind veils of bougainvillea and overgrown ivy that climbed its stucco skin like soft, blooming fingers. Its windows were dust-streaked and ambered with pollen and light, and the air around it felt heavier than it should have. As if time inside passed differently. As if the walls breathed slowly, patiently. Erin returned alone in mid-July. It was a Thursday. She drove from their apartment in Echo Park, without telling Matthew. They hadn't talked much about the house since moving out in April, but he could feel it every time her mind wandered. She would pause mid-sentence when talking about something else, eyes drifting somewhere over his shoulder. Sometimes she'd wake in the middle of the night and just listen. The key still fit the lock perfectly. The door opened with a slow push, reluctant but not resistant. Inside, the air was stale with age and memory. It smelled faintly of dry wood, old smoke, and something else earthy and metallic, like rusted camera parts left in the rain. The kind of smell that doesn't come from any one place, but from the past itself. Erin moved through the house like someone returning to a chapel. She didn't turn on the lights. She didn't need to. Upstairs, the bedroom window still looked out toward the canyon where the sun dipped behind the hills. The room was shadowy and warm. On the dresser sat a thin film of dust, disturbed only where she had once set down a glass of water months before. The ring of its absence still marked the wood. She sat on the bed. Nothing moved. Nothing spoke. And yet there was a presence in the silence. A listening. It was as if the house recognized her footsteps, had been waiting, holding its breath in the dust and darkness. When she finally whispered, "I'm back," the words seemed to settle into the air, absorbed rather than echoed. She spent nearly 4 hours there, doing very little. She walked barefoot, gently touching the walls. She ran her hands over the surface of the kitchen counter where she once sliced lemons for afternoon drinks. She opened the old linen closet and stared at the top shelf, where a small pair of round sunglasses had once been discovered, tucked behind a jar of sea glass. The house seemed unchanged, but something had deepened. In the hallway, where they had once caught the camera footage of the figure, she paused. The air here was colder not just in temperature, but in feeling, as if whatever watched here did so more intensely. She turned her head slowly toward the stairwell. The light at the top flickered once. Her breath caught, and then nothing. No movement, no shape, but a memory unfolded inside her, not one of her own. A flash of sound. Distant music, low and throbbing like an old bass line from a late 70s vinyl. A scent of marijuana and something sharper, almost medicinal. A woman's laugh, brief and rising, cut off mid-note. A voice, whispering, "This is the mirror. Look into it. Keep going." Then she was back, standing still in the quiet. Erin backed away slowly. She left the lights off. She didn't lock the door when she left. The next event came a week later. Matthew was alone in the apartment. Erin had said she was going out to walk around Silver Lake, clear her head. She didn't return that night. At 3:12 a.m., his phone buzzed. One missed call. No voicemail. At 3:14, another. He answered on the third. No voice, just static. But beneath it, barely audible, he heard music. A long, winding guitar solo. Slow and trance-like. Familiar. He hung up. Then he remembered. The record. The end. The next morning, she was back. Standing at the door barefoot, her eyes red but calm, a faint smile twitching at the corners of her mouth. "It's okay now," she said softly. I think he was just trying to show me something." Matthew didn't ask where she'd been. That night, she placed an old Polaroid camera on the kitchen table. Dusty, leather-bound, and unmistakably vintage. She looked at him, as if daring him to ask where she got it. Instead, he asked, "Did you go inside again?" Erin nodded. "He let me in." Then she opened the camera's back, pulled out an undeveloped photo, and held it up to the light. The square was mostly blank, but something was there in the center. A faint white outline, like the blur of a man in a vest. Face turned, leaning slightly toward the lens. Erin began spending more time at the house. She told Matthew she was cleaning it up, but the truth was more complicated. She said she felt safe there, protected. "There's a story in the walls," she told him one night, her voice distant. "I can feel it now, not just his presence, but his memories, like he's trying to preserve something no one else can tell." Matthew didn't go with her, but one afternoon, he parked down the street and watched from inside his car. She was standing on the front lawn, barefoot again, turning slowly in a circle, her eyes closed, like she was listening to music only she could hear. He drove away before she could see him. That night, Erin told him she was going to start developing the rolls of film she'd found. "I think he left them for me." Matthew tried to argue. "You're not a photographer." But she just smiled and said, "Maybe I was in another life." The darkroom was improvised in the guest bathroom of their Echo Park apartment. Erin had covered the lone window with thick black trash bags, taped tightly, and stuffed a towel along the base of the door. A red bulb, ordered from a vintage photography supplier, dangled crookedly from the ceiling by its wire. The scent of the chemical's acetic acid, fixer, developer hung in the air like a faint, sour ghost. Matthew stood outside the door for a long time, listening. He could hear the occasional rustle of photo paper, the sharp flick of tongs, the low click of the enlarger. Erin spoke to herself in barely audible tones. Not full words, more like sounds. Hums, murmurs, sometimes a low chuckle. Once, a pause so long he knocked, fearing something had happened. Her voice was calm when she answered, "It's okay. He's just showing me things." The first set of prints appeared the next morning, laid out like tarot cards on their kitchen counter. Thick black and white images, grainy, shadow-choked, but unmistakable. Matthew stared at them, silent. One photo showed the living room of the Fonda house, but not as it looked now. The furniture was different. Velvet chairs, deeper colors, a strange-looking stereo system built into the wall. The people in the image were caught mid-motion. A man with long hair, shirtless, arms raised, a woman behind him in what looked like a fox mask, kneeling, head bowed. Another photo was taken outside. The backyard. Same sloping canyon edge, but the lights in the background were different, fewer houses back then, maybe. A small group sat in a circle around what appeared to be a low fire pit. There were symbols drawn in the dirt. A man in the center of the frame was playing a flute. His face was tilted toward the moon. But the third photo, was harder to explain. It was taken in the hallway, from the far end, looking toward the staircase. And there, clearer than anything else in the frame, was Peter Fonda himself. Or rather, someone wearing his face. The figure wasn't standing. He was floating an inch above the ground, arms by his sides, head turned toward the lens. His eyes were open but unfocused, his mouth slightly parted. And in the background, as if leaking out of the walls themselves, was a dense, shadowy blur that resembled a crowd of faces. Half seen, half formed. Matthew said nothing. He slid the photo back into the envelope and walked away. A week later, Erin moved back into the house. She packed lightly, just clothes, books, and the camera. She told Matthew it would only be temporary, that she needed space to finish something. "There's a rhythm to it now," she said as she closed the trunk of her car. "Every night I'm there. It's like I remember a little more of his world. I think I'm close to understanding it." Matthew watched her drive off with the same look he had the day they bought the house, equal parts fascination and regret. She stopped answering his texts by the second night. On the third, he drove up unannounced. The sky was bruised with evening clouds, and the road twisted in that uneasy way Laurel Canyon roads do, too quiet, too narrow, too forgotten. When he pulled up, the house looked abandoned. No lights, no music, no movement, but the front door was wide open. Inside, the air was heavy and still, like it had been drained of all motion. The only sound was the hum of the refrigerator, and even that sounded deeper than usual, like a throat murmuring in sleep. He found Erin upstairs. She stood in what used to be the office, but the desk had been removed, and in its place was a tall, antique mirror propped against the wall. A second mirror leaned across from it, creating an infinite corridor of reflections. Candles flickered on the floor between them, their flames disturbingly still. She was barefoot, her eyes closed, one hand resting gently against the glass. Matthew spoke her name once. She opened her eyes slowly but didn't turn. "Don't break the reflection," she said softly. "He's coming through." "What are you talking about?" he asked, stepping into the room. Erin finally turned to him. Her pupils were wide, dark as spilled ink. There was something in her expression that wasn't quite her, a calm so total it felt inhuman. "You don't see it yet," she whispered. "But you will. You've already been invited." Erin found an 8mm film reel behind the drywall. She said she had heard a knocking, faint and rhythmic, behind the closet in the master bedroom. And when she removed the panel, the reel was just there, wrapped in a red silk scarf, resting atop a dust-covered box of incense cones and Polaroids. She bought an old projector from a vintage electronics shop on Melrose. Set it up in the living room. The first time she played the reel, the lights blew out. Not just flickered, popped. The whole house dropped into darkness, lit only by the bouncing white and black images on the far wall. Matthew had arrived 10 minutes earlier, after days of silence from her. He stood near the kitchen, arms folded tightly against himself, trying not to shiver. The reel played scenes without sound. Fonda sat in a circle of people, all of them in strange garb, white robes, feathered vests, someone holding a silver bell. He was younger than Matthew expected, maybe mid-40s, but his eyes were tired, distant, fixed on something just out of frame. Then came a shift. The film began to flicker more violently. A woman stepped into view, and then suddenly the scene reversed, rewound, and began again, but the room in the film was no longer the living room. It was the hallway, and the figure, whoever had held the camera, was walking slowly toward the mirror. As the film ended, the smell of something sweet and rotting filled the air. Erin stood up slowly. "He's almost here," she said. Matthew didn't ask who he was. He didn't want to know. By early September, the heat had thickened like a curtain, pressing against the canyon, sealing in the house with a kind of breathless intensity. The bougainvillea out front had grown wild, curling over the driveway, the petals papery and dry like small red warnings. The windows of the house were always open now, though no wind moved through them. Erin said she liked it that way, said it let the airflow of memory pass freely. Matthew stopped sleeping altogether. He remained in their apartment, hollow-eyed, losing weight, the TV flickering static he never noticed. Sometimes, at night, the projector would click on by itself in the next room. Always the same reel. Always the same movements. Peter's face in candlelight, turning slowly to the lens. The robed figures in silent trance. The mirror. The deepening blur behind the glass. Then one night Erin called. Just once. She didn't say his name. Just whispered, "You should come now. I don't want you to miss it." The road up to the house was empty. The neighborhood had grown unusually still, the kind of quiet that comes only during electrical blackouts or just before earthquakes. Matthew noticed that a dog a few houses down was sitting bolt upright in its yard, staring toward the Fonda house without blinking. Inside, the hallway light was flickering dimly. The walls had changed. Photos were tacked along the corridor, hundreds of them, maybe more, all black and white, all taken with the old Polaroid Erin had found. They showed the house from impossible angles, corners that didn't exist, doorways that led into other decades, faces half turned away from time. In one, Peter sat beside a mirror with his own reflection missing. In another, Erin stood in the master bedroom, but the figure in the background was him, Matthew, sleeping, exactly as he had 2 nights before in their apartment. The door to the office was open. Inside, the mirrors had multiplied. There were 4 now, arranged in a perfect square, floor to ceiling. Erin stood at the center, her eyes wide open, her hands outstretched as if conducting unseen air. But she wasn't speaking. She wasn't breathing either. Instead, her mouth hung open in a silent O, her body swaying slightly, as if in rhythm to something pulsing behind the mirrors. Matthew took 1 step forward and saw himself. Not his reflection, but himself standing behind the glass. He was older, not by much, but the version in the mirror had eyes that were not quite his. They were Peter's, blue-gray, knowing, endless. The air began to compress, not with heat, but with pressure, emotional pressure. Like the entire house was pressing inward, folding like a book closing around its story. Then the glass cracked, not all at once, but in a slow, deliberate crawl from corner to corner, like spider veins tracing time backward. The mirrors trembled. A low sound began to rise from beneath the house, like an engine idling in the dirt, or a reel turning that had never stopped spinning. And then, from the center of the mirrors, something stepped out. It wasn't Peter, but it was him, not as an actor, not as a man, but as the echo of memory made flesh fluid, flickering, as if still projected onto a surface that could no longer hold it. He wore the same vest he wore in Easy Rider, but his face was older and sadder, as if all the decades of trying to be someone had finally weighed him down into a shape that didn't fit this world anymore. He looked at Erin first. She nodded. Then he turned to Matthew. "You know what this house is now," he said, his voice low and resonant, like wind through trees. Matthew tried to speak, but the sound caught in his throat. "It was never just mine," Peter said. "It was always the reel, the loop. I left it playing, and now it's full." He reached out, and the moment his fingers touched Matthew's chest, Matthew woke in the bedroom. Morning. Birds outside. Erin asleep beside him, her breath calm and steady. No mirrors, no photos, no sound but the wind through the open windows. But on the nightstand sat the Polaroid, and in it a shot of the hallway. From the other side of the mirror. Matthew never asked questions after that. Erin stayed. The house no longer groaned or whispered. It simply watched. And once in a while, late at night, when the projector clicked on by itself, they would sit together, holding hands, and let the reel play through. Let the story loop once more. Not to be haunted, but to remember. Don't forget to subscribe and like if you liked this story.